Hi, and welcome to another episode of Stimming in Stilettos with Dr. Tasha. Once again, I'm always excited about my guests, but I'm definitely excited about this one. Dr. Natalie King is here with us, and she's doing a lot of great work here in the Atlanta metropolitan area and in Florida. But she's also a STEM advocate. She's a Black woman in STEM. She's everything that I'm always talking about. And so I'm really glad to have her on the show today. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Dr. Tasha, for inviting me to speak with you.
Man, I can't even wait for this conversation. So, as we start every show, please tell us your STEM story.
Well, my STEM story started out a little different. I was always good at science and mathematics. I even participated in competition teams, but I never really identified as a science person. I just knew that they were courses that I needed to take in order to pursue my initial goal, which was to become a medical doctor. My sister and I know you heard the story about the pact, but we made our own little pact that we were going to pursue medicine together. She's a year ahead of me, and she was going to be a family physician. I was going to be a pediatrician, and we were just going to rock it out. We were going to open up our own clinics, and our goal has always been to serve the underserved. When I was in high school, I said I was going to go to, Costa Rica, go to the Caribbean and do this kind of work. And I think my life will still take me, into the Caribbean. But right now, I found where the work needs to be done right in our own communities. I just started off at University of Florida, pursued a degree in applied physiology and kinesiology with a specialization in exercise physiology. And once I was done with my undergraduate career, I decided to teach high school. My mother is a teacher, and I wanted to have a couple years to almost give back to a community that I felt gave a lot to me. A lot of times when we go to different cities and we pursue our degrees, that's it. We get our degrees and we leave. And I did not want that to be my story. And so I decided to teach at Eastside High School. I taught high school biology and chemistry for a major program, which are more of our neighborhood kids, honors courses, AP, the International Baccalaureate program. And I literally saw the division within, it was a school within a school where we had, even though we were in a predominantly African-American community, the students who were participating in the advanced courses were predominantly white and Asian who did not live in that community. And so I've always wanted to figure out what could I do to make it more accessible where our children would be able to have access to those higher level courses. By the time you get to high school, they've already been tracked. And so it becomes increasingly difficult to, make those shifts. Even trying to get those who were into those courses to remain was a challenge in and of itself. And so I decided to start doing informal STEM programs. I started with my church, and that was 9 years ago where we started our first STEM camp. And it was in our community for our children. What I learned is that I was developing curriculum for the community college that had its own programs, for the university that had its own programs, and I was, getting paid to do that work. But it really still wasn't getting at the mission, my own personal mission, which was to serve my community. And so I decided to basically put all my energies into developing curriculum that will be accessible to our children. So within their neighborhoods, in their communities at an affordable price, so that we would begin to eliminate some of these barriers that were preventing them from, having access to early exposure to STEM and STEM careers. While doing that work, I was teaching, and although I had I had a strong science background, I had a passion for teaching and for children, but I wasn't trained to be an educator. And so what I decided to do was go back, and at that moment, I went back and did a master's in special education. And what I began to learn were techniques that would help children with special needs. But I saw that a lot of these techniques that I learned just helped all students in general. It just made me a better educator. And so while doing that program, I took a course with Dr. Rose Pringle, which is an inquiry-based science course. And she asked me to come in and submit my portfolio. So she already made, it was for those who were in her master's program full-time. I was teaching full-time and could not attend most of the classes. And so I was doing alternative assignments. And she was really working with me to ensure that I could still take her course. But when I submitted the portfolio, she asked me what was next. And when she asked me that question, I was like, well, I'm studying for the MCATs. I'm going to medical school. Like, duh. What do you mean what's next? And she's like, Natalie, you really need to consider pursuing a PhD in science education. And at that moment I said, what? What is that? Even though I've had professors all this time, I never even considered myself to pursue the PhD route. I was just so, one track focused in terms of, I love science, I love kids, that I was going to become a pediatrician. That was just it. I never really just expanded my thinking in terms of careers. And it may be that I wasn't necessarily exposed to it, which I don't think is always the case. Even when you're exposed to it, you don't necessarily see yourself in that position or in that role. Because I did do the McNair program where I was engaged in research as an undergraduate student. I worked in another lab as an undergraduate student, and yet still did not think of myself as a potential researcher. And I certainly didn't think of researching in social, for social aspects and doing social research. So when she said that to me, it was almost like a light just went off, because I went ahead and did the GRE. So I changed from studying for the MCAT to now for the GRE. And it was like every door just began to open. Like it was just like God knew that it was the right path for me. And it almost had to work out that way, because it seemed as if, okay, well, maybe I'll try this for a little longer and then I'll pursue medicine, right? And so I just could not get that from the back of my head. And it's when these doors started opening and I started basically figuring out my niche within science education that I realized that this was it. This is where I was designed to be. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here today. It's because of Dr. Rose Pringle, who I consider to be, one of my mentors, who realized the science educator in me.
Nice. Isn't it just, that is the way God works. So when you find that path and he's like, yeah, I'm glad that you discovered it. And all the doors just sort of open up, and it makes it easy for you to walk in what it is you're supposed to be doing. It's amazing how that happens when it happens. So when you were in grad school, well, take us through you finishing the PhD, and tell us what that path was.
So once I actually started the PhD program, I didn't really have a cohort that I started with that was in science education. And so it always made it a little difficult, because I was, even though we were with others who were pursuing different, I guess, with disciplines within education, I was pretty much one of the only ones in science ed at the time. And so sometimes it felt lonely, and it felt like I was very reliant on mentors as well as my advisors, rather than colleagues. And not that I didn't have friends, it was just that we were in different fields.
Right.
Another thing is, when I went to conferences, I attended and I just didn't hear the types of conversations that I thought should be taking place within these disciplines. For example, a lot of times when I went to conferences, we weren't talking about, racism and within science education and those children who are left out. I mean, it was discussed, but it didn't feel like rich and authentic conversations that should be happening. And then I didn't see too many people who look like me within the field. And so it always made it difficult, because I wanted to have those conversations and I needed to find the right people to have those conversations with.
Yeah.
And where it wasn't going to be, well, I'm still young, I'm only a graduate student, these are PhDs, these people have been in the field for, these are renowned scholars. So how do I even create a space for myself in a field that I felt necessarily wasn't ready maybe for this type of work, or those who were doing the work weren't doing it the way that I thought it should be done. And so I just wanted to figure out how I could almost replicate myself if it makes sense. I wanted to enter into the field, but I didn't want to be one of the only ones. I didn't want this to be the story. So my, for the past really 5 years, I've been very, very intentional about identifying other people, just like Dr. Pringle saw the science educator in me. As I've been working in schools, partnering with other organizations, figuring out how we can bring others into the field so that we can build capacity to have these rich conversations and
Yes.
begin to change what research says about Black girls in science, about African Americans in science, about Latinx populations within the STEM fields, so that it wasn't deficit based in terms of what we're not doing, or just statistics, okay, that we're not here, that we are underrepresented. We know this. So we know even some of the issues that cause us to be underrepresented, but what stories are not being heard are those who are here and who are doing well, and how we can begin to change systems so that others can begin to come in these fields and excel and do well. It's not by accident why we're underrepresented. These are systems that were created to exclude. And so in my doctoral program, I was working with Dr. Pringle on an NSF grant called U Futures. University of Florida unites to reform, I don't know, teachers and I don't know, in science. I can't remember the exact thing that it stood for. I used to be able to rattle off the tongue, but I guess it's been a couple of years since I've done it. And so U Futures project, and what we did was we worked with teachers across the state, a state of Florida, in order to help them to build capacity to become science teacher leaders. In doing so, it helped me to just immerse myself into the field writ large and just get the, I guess, the language that I needed in order to be able to communicate with other scholars within the field. From there, I could have been pigeonholed into doing my dissertation work on that, because that's what I was a project, manager for the grant. But I still, in my summers, were leading these STEM programs and doing a lot more community-based work through the summers and throughout the year. So Dr. Pringle basically sat me down and said, look, Natalie, if you're going to continue doing this work, you have to figure out a way to make it coincide with the work that you have to do within the field, because you just don't, your energy is not, unlimited, right?
Right.
You have to make these decisions. So if you want to continue doing this work, you have to develop research questions. It can't just be a thing of practice. You have to figure out ways in which what you're doing in practice can begin to inform research. And when she had that conversation with me, it began to make me think differently in terms of what it is that I was doing and the types of data points that I needed to collect. Because we knew that it was successful, but there was I wasn't collecting the data that I needed in order to inform research on the success of the program, which makes it difficult because I wasn't doing it for research purposes.
Right.
And so it had to be this iteration of, research and practice, and me thinking in terms of, okay, what I'm learning in research and how can I apply this to what I'm doing in practice. And so I ended up doing my dissertation work not on the program structure itself, even though that informed the work, but what brought me to science education too was Dr. Pringle had done some work about Black girls' positionality with STEM. And so when I read some of her work, I just saw myself as a Black girl growing up, and those students who were brilliant, Black girls and boys, but my passion's always really been
Black
for
girls.
the girls, in my own classroom, and figuring out how can I get them to see themselves as science talent and to begin to project themselves into the image of a scientist or a mathematician or others who can not only do science but can contribute to the field. And so that's where kind of it changed for me in terms of dissertation. I just asked her, I said, may I do my work on this, because this is where I see myself going in the future.
Yeah.
And a lot of dissertation advisors would not have said yes, because it would have been beneficial for her to have a dissertation to come out of her grant project. It would have been beneficial for me to do my dissertation on that grant project, since that's what I'm working on
Right.
a week. But she provided me that space. She's like, this is not, where you're going in terms of informal learning and, out of school time. That's not necessarily my expertise, but I'm going to support you in the direction that you want to go. And with that, I decided to go ahead and pursue that kind of work, which has really informed the work that I'm doing now as a faculty member at Georgia State.
Nice. So I feel like there's a little bit of similarity between your story and my story. When I went to and taught high school, so taught at a high school here that had the school within a school model, and guess where I sat, right? I was math. So in my classroom, same story where we're in a predominantly African American neighborhood, but the kids in my class didn't look like me. And so, though I did have one class, and I tell this story all the time because it informed my dissertation, where we had, I think there was maybe about 18 kids in the class, and 15 of them were girls, and 3 were boys. And again, I taught math, and those girls were rocking out, just busting out tests, understanding concepts, answering the questions. But when you have conversation with them, they would insist on saying, "Oh, I'm not good at math. I don't even understand this stuff. I don't know what this is." And I'm like, "Girl, you just made a 97. This is algebra 2. This is calculus. Like, what do you hear the words you're saying? Like, you see how what I'm showing you, this evidence, and what you're saying, they don't match."
Right.
And I was totally fascinated by that dichotomy. So your ability says one thing, but your thought about yourself and your own ability says another, and they were incongruent. And so that's what my dissertation was about, was sort of having what influences a girl's thought about her abilities in STEM, and where do those things come from? Like, and they are long lasting, and they persist long after they've gone on, and they still have those things. And so it's just like, I just found that to be so fascinating. And of course, the boys in the class, there's only 3 of them, but again, they in the middle of the pack in the class, and they're always like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna be an engineer." Like, no, it's like, no, there was no loss of confidence in their thoughts about themselves. And so I'm like, well, I have not paid attention to it before, or at least not in that capacity. But I thank God every day for putting me in that class, and for me being able to experience that as the teacher firsthand, because I was riveted, fascinated by what, or at least having to live that out over the next couple of years. And so just like, I have got to study this. I have got to figure this out, what this is. My dream has always been to replicate myself, because again, black women in engineering are, again, like you said, we already know the numbers. So it's about, okay, so on the flip side of that, we know the numbers. How do we affect change to those things? So I've enjoyed hearing your journey. So where are you now, and what are you doing?
I think the easiest thing is, what am I not doing? So, I mean, now we're, of course, I'm at Georgia State University, and I focus a lot of my research still on Black girls' STEM identity development, and looking at these transitions. So as they go from elementary to middles to high school, and high school to post-secondary, what's happening? My dissertation work initially focused on 4th through 8th grade girls, because that's where literature was showing that they began to lose interest in science.
Yep.
So I wanted to delve deeply into what was happening in the informal context, like in the space that we created in the community, versus what was taking place in school. And it wasn't really a versus at the time. It was, okay, what are your experiences during the summer program? Then I would follow them during the school year to understand what were their experiences with school science and school math, just to find out that there was this, it was a mismatch between the two, where the teachers embraced who they were and their science talent in our program. But then when they would go back to school, they wouldn't get called on. They wouldn't be selected for prestigious clubs, or they
Right.
wouldn't be recommended for the magnet programs. And so we knew that they were brilliant. However, sometimes teachers or the school system didn't recognize that brilliance.
Right.
And so that's what I began to do more of. And initially, I wasn't looking at STEM identity. I just wanted to learn their experiences. But I know now that experiences inform the identities that you form within
Did,
the sciences and these different fields.
so
And
did
so,
you did you did you at any point did you look at their home situations?
so what's interesting is that the way in which I think about parental engagement and parental involvement is so much different than what's been published about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there were parents a lot of times of our children, they trust that the school is doing what they send their children to school to do. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not always what's happening. And so what we've done a better job of is helping parents to, one, become more informed, and two, give them the language to advocate on behalf of their children.
Man, that's a whole word right there. They can't. I mean, but it's true because parents, and some of it I have been able to discover is based off of their own school experience. They don't know how to be their kids' advocate. So in essence, what we do is we send the kids to school and they have no one other than themselves, and they don't know how to do it. And so if a parent can learn how to be their child's advocate in school, it's so much better for the kid.
It is a lot better. And it's funny because sometimes the kids will advocate, but it'll show up. They'll code that as them being too assertive,
Yep.
or being rebellious, or have a negative connotation to what it is that they're actually trying to do. And so it's almost like a lose-lose situation if it's not done well. And so, yes, the families have become increasingly important. But what we try to do is also, we have our families' backs, right? So if at any point you're going into, these conferences, I've been to more student conferences, parent conferences than, you know, I can even talk about. Because if you don't feel like you have the language to talk, or you don't really feel comfortable doing it, I'm going to help you this first time. But what I see is that this is a gift that keeps on giving, because once they begin to build capacity, they're doing the same thing to others, their own family members. They're showing up to their own family members, telling them exactly what they need to do, because now they've seen it done and done well. Um, it's just unfortunate because sometimes when they see you in the school system, they automatically assume that you're not going to be involved, or they automatically project this image on you that may not even be the truth. That you don't care because you don't show up to a parent conference that conflicts with your work schedule, or
Right.
so they don't even ask you like, what is your availability. They schedule these things and then judge you when you're unable to attend.
Right.
And so anyway, we just try to find other ways, creative ways for parents to, one, see their own value, and to ensure that they could advocate on behalf of their children, but also working with children to give them ways that they can advocate for themselves.
And I think part of this conversation has to be about how they're different. Advocacy looks different. It doesn't, there's not one right way to do it. And so I think sometimes school systems think of advocacy as, or a parent showing up as the only way you can be an advocate for your child. And I'm like, that's not true. There's so many, and it just, from family to family to family, it has to look different because no two families are the same and everybody's situation is different. So we just need to change that conversation, and for parents too, because I think in their mind it looks a certain way too. So
There's accepted forms, or acceptable forms of what advocacy and parent involvement or engagement looks like.
yeah, that's unfortunate, but I'm glad that you're out here doing that work.
We're out here doing the work, and there's work that still needs to be done. In terms of teaching, like what I've tried to do is redevelop our methods courses. So redevelop the courses that we're using to train future teachers.
Nice.
What we put now is more of a focus on equity, more of a focus on anti-racist teaching, how to develop positive classroom communities rather than how to manage kids. How do you develop relationships with your children, and ensuring that they know how to teach the standards without letting the standards dictate exactly what they should be doing in the classroom. So for example, why don't we go ahead and learn who our students are, what they're interested in, and then use that to inform what we're going to teach, and then align it with the standards rather than, okay, these are the standards, this is what I'm going to teach, regardless of the students who are sitting in front of me.
Oh, I love that. I honestly, sincerely wish and pray that more teachers adopt that attitude. Having been in the school system myself and understand the pressures of meeting those standards, but also understanding that you stand in front of 20 to 30 young people every day with the idea that, yes, I have to meet these standards, but I still have to meet the needs of the people who are in front of me every day. And how do you marry those two so that no one loses? You know, it's a tough job, especially when the pressures of the school system and the state is basically you get graded on whether this kid does well on a test. So
It almost, the systems are set up where a lot of our teachers are afraid to teach in Title I or schools.
mhm,
They call them urban schools or whatever title they want to, pie need schools. There's so many different labels that they put on this,
right,
but they don't want to teach the teachers who need them the most, because the accountability measures and pressures, they're not it doesn't reward teachers who are putting in the extra work to help the students whose needs are the most, really. And so to me, it's easy. If we're going to get paid the same, I'll teach these gifted kids who are going to learn anyway,
right,
without having to go through all of this. I can put a worksheet in front of them, give them a textbook, they're going to read, they're motivated, they're going to complete this worksheet, they're going to learn it, and I don't actually have to teach. It's not set up to reward and to properly support those who are teaching students whose needs are beyond just the academic, where
right.
we have to get at some of the trauma that was inflicted upon them by schools. That some of the social emotional other things that are happening. And so at any given time for a teacher, you are a therapist, you're a counselor, you're a mom, you're an older sister. Like, they almost cling to you, like they depend on you to provide structure and to provide some support. And even though some of them may resist, they respect you when you my students respected me, because even though they may have been watching movies in other classes and didn't have to submit anything, when they came into my class, it was bell to bell. When they
Yep.
came to my class, there was a specific structure. They knew exactly what to expect, and I was consistent. I showed up every day. In terms of my expectations, it was high, and I wasn't going to stop until they met it. But we had fun. I knew who they were. I knew who their families were. They saw me in school. They saw me in their communities at their games. They saw me in our churches within our own communities, and so I was very present. And
Right.
so what we have to do is help teachers to realize that this profession is not all about you just having the content and the pedagogy. That is actually a small part to what it is that you're really expected to do. They want you to be someone who they can rely on, they can depend on, they may be able to confide in, that they can know that you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And when they show up every day, they're going to learn something, and they're going to learn something and figure out how it's applicable to their everyday life, not just learning these abstract things that you show no relevance. And so I think that's where we have to begin going back to just the craft and the professionalism of teaching, especially within the STEM disciplines.
I was just gonna say, so within the STEM discipline, if we're talking about STEM teaching, what what do you think is needed next or most, probably more so right now, in our current situation than at any other time?
We need to humanize STEM education. what's happening right now is that everything, our federal initiatives, our accountability measures, everything right now is about the workforce.
Mm.
We're falling behind other nations and other countries in terms of our innovativeness and our global competitiveness. And that's what you just see. You read that over and over again. That is not my goal, and that will never be my goal, is workforce development. My goal is to humanize the STEM disciplines. They begin to project themselves into that image, but then they also begin to see the STEM disciplines as a mechanism and a vehicle for them to be able to solve their own problems and their
Mm.
community problems. In doing so, we're going to solve the workforce issue because they are now engineers, they're now innovators, they've now have found a niche for themselves that wasn't about our own capitalistic agenda of just workforce development, but it's about solving their own community's needs. And they see themselves as a solution to a problem. And so you have a lot of us who are saying, well, I want to pursue medicine, or I want to pursue this because I want to be able to help people. Well, if we begin to show our children how they can help people within the STEM disciplines, then you're automatically going to begin to change those numbers in terms of workforce development.
I feel like, I mean, it's just like that was so damn good.
Yeah.
But it's so true. I mean, we have to figure out a way to so that kids can see them in real ways, like not just this, like, oh, put a black face on a STEM person and be like, there's you.
These
No, but
superficial ways that they want
right.
to check off.
Right. And it's like, no, we can't do it that way. It's not going to work. These kids will see straight through it anyway. But if we make it so that they can really see that these are careers that you can really have, you can do these things. But B, these are the professions that will help you be able to be the community activist you want to be in ways that can impact your community in big ways, right? So, or small ways, depending upon what your level is. And so if we were to do that, then it becomes, okay, Joe, he's an engineer, or Sally, she's a scientist, or whatever it is. It's just the thing that is happening in your community, as opposed to it being a special thing. Like that was the thing that would happen to me. I would tell people I'm an engineer, and they'd be like, oh, and I'm like, I'm regular, like everyone else.
Where what I want is that they don't get all excited about just seeing a black engineer or a black scientist, right? That it just becomes the norm. Like
Right.
they just are seeing so many of us around them that it's just normal for you to think, oh, I can become a scientist or I can become an engineer. You
Right.
can't do nothing about it.
Right. And that's absolutely correct. I love that. Okay, so now what are you doing right now? And where can people find you?
So right now, I'm at Georgia State University, science education faculty member there. And where can you find me? Really, you can find me in the community, but online. It's Dr. Natalie King on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Dr. Natalie King. And I'm just continuing to do a lot of this work. So one, I'm working on a grant project right now. It's called Developing STEM Professionals as Educators and Teacher Leaders. And with that grant, it's an NSF funded project where we are recruiting STEM professionals, and we wrote it where we were focused specifically on Black male STEM professionals to begin to recruit them and to prepare them to become excellent teachers, highly effective teachers, but also teacher leaders. A lot of times when we have Black males into our schools, they position them as like the disciplinarians, as the coaches, and really they have these unique talents and skill sets that they can begin to really be the face of STEM within the classrooms, so that it's not, it becomes more commonplace where children of color begin to see STEM professionals of color and who are there in classrooms and mentoring them and begin to inform the ways in which, um, now you have teachers who can recommend you for magnet programs. You have teachers in position who begin to see that talent in you and can begin to teach you their own skill sets that they bring from the field. And so I'm working on that project right now. I'm also working on the NSF career project, early career project, looking at Black girl brilliance and STEM identity development. That's going to be a 5-year project where I'm focused specifically on Black and brown girls and those transitions that I talked to you about as they transition from middle school into high school, as well as high school post-secondary, and the ways in which they're developing their STEM identity over time within a STEM school. And this is in partnership with Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I continue doing other research projects. My own personal passion is looking at the role of the church and how we can partner with churches in order to build capacity within communities in order to make STEM more accessible, particularly for Black and brown children and children who are who may live in economically challenged communities. And so those are my main kind of research agendas right now, what I'm working with, and what I tend to, I'm not really the greatest at posting a lot of what I'm doing, but I'm going to do better in terms of just kind of making it visible in terms of the work that goes into this. And then outside of Georgia State, I'm also the founder and executive director of I Am STEM LLC, where I do educational consulting, but most of my focus is on providing high quality summer enrichment programs, particularly in Black and brown communities, in order to build capacity. This past summer, we just got through offering our first virtual transmission of I Am STEM Camp. And it was just a post that I made. We created a flyer. We put the posted on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And with that, we were able to just get the word out with a flyer. People just shared it and shared it and shared it. We've served 300 children representing 21 states, as well as some of the Caribbean. And so that's just the power of information sharing. We were still be able to provide access to STEM programs because more than 90% of the participants were Black or African American. And so when we're talking about in terms of access and equity, we're still able to find innovative ways to serve our children, even when programs are shut down and other things are happening. And so I think that this is now the time for us to begin to disrupt structures that have really been oppressive, and figuring out ways that we can begin to open up new doors of opportunities for our children.
I mean, what else? That's a whole lot. But I also want to tell you that it's appreciated what you're doing in your community and what you're doing through research, and it's all needed. And so if no one has the opportunity to tell you that what you're doing is so needed, and I appreciate all of your work. And having had a sideline view to some of it, I just know that you've put your whole heart into it, and you can't really ask for much more than that. So thank you, Dr. Natalie. I appreciate you. All right, one last question. If you had the opportunity to travel back in time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her and why?
Ooh, I have a few things that have really resonated with me, particularly with everything being, shut down and having the time to now reflect, be still enough to reflect. And the first thing I would say is intentionality, to just be very intentional about your moves, but also prayerful. I've learned to move a little bit more in silence and not having to announce everything, because in a lot of our fields, many people are not honest. And you still have where people are, colonizing. They're basically taking and running with it, and it does not bring the same authenticity that you have brought to your own work. And so just having this also discernment, because everyone who is with you is not necessarily for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've had to learn that the hard way, because some people just benefit simply by being associated with you, and they don't necessarily mean you well. And so, like, just thinking in science terms, we have to get away from relationships that are, parasitic. So if it's not symbiotic and mutually beneficial, then it's not worth your time. And so just being strong enough to make those decisions and have enough discernment to understand, where people fit in. Another thing that's extremely important is just developing a strong support system, as well as making time for self-care. There's going to be people who are going to protect you and have your back. And when you're engaged in this type of work, the work can get heavy really quickly. And so you have to surround yourself with people who care about you and will help to carry the load. Now, they don't necessarily have to have the same expertise as you do, but I'm talking about people who will recognize when you're tired and will remind you to rest, or who will say, okay, Natalie, what can I do? How can I support you? And so you have to have like good mentorship, good advisors, family, colleagues, just good friends, sister friends, and other friends who will just hold you accountable, but also make sure that you're taking care of yourself while taking care of others. I think another thing that I want to mention quickly is about inferiority, especially within the STEM fields. People will try to make you feel like you don't belong, or that they're giving you a favor by you being in their presence or you being in the room. And so just reminding yourself that you are valuable, that you can be humble yet unapologetic. So I'm always like, I always give God the glory for everything that I'm able to accomplish, because I'm nothing without him. But also I understand that faith without works is dead. And so we put in the sleepless nights. I've made the necessary sacrifices in order to experience today's successes. And so don't allow people to take that away from you. Another thing that has been even more like that has really resonated with me is that, you can be imitated, but never really replicated. And so God has literally chosen you to do this kind of work. And so you don't have to spend all your time and energy trying to prove to other people your own worth and why you matter in this space. And so really just invest your energies wisely, protect your energy, and celebrate your successes and rest.
Okay, so Dr. Natalie has preached a whole word today. The only thing that we haven't been able to do is collect the offering. But no, I really appreciate that. And I think that young girls and young women professionals in STEM will really appreciate and resonate with what you said. So again, thank you for being my guest today on Stemming Stilettos.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tasha, for having this. This space that you're creating right now is critical. It's so important. And I pray that it will continue not to be, to be a blessing to so many people, and that really that your eyes haven't seen where this is going to take you and where it's going to take others, and the impact that it will have on others, just to hear other women, especially women of color within these fields, one, who are successful, but two, who are very, very transparent in terms of their journey and their struggles, and our willingness to be able to support others who are aspiring to become the next engineer or to become the next STEM educator. And so we really appreciate this space that you're creating for us. We love you. It's necessary.
Do not make me cry today. I cannot, but thank you so much. It means everything. That means everything to me. So I say goodbye to my audience today, and until we meet again, you guys keep yourselves safe. Bye.